Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, Betty. Betty, please let the record show that the board met in executive session to consider collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. Let's start with the board minutes, the approval of the minutes from January 25th, 2018. Could I have a motion? And a second? Anyone? Okay, second from Rich, and then any comments or questions? Okay, yes. Rich.
I'm just wondering, looking over the minutes, dealing with the presentation by Mr. Cousins, Dr. a lot of the questions that the trust...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I have a hard time hearing. Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, I apologize. A lot of the questions that the trustees raised and the answers that were given, from my perception in there, really were not included. I was wondering if there's a way we could go back and revisit that and be a little bit more specific.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
So, I also don't have a very specific comment on it, but so I had a comment during the presentation that's not reflected in the minutes, but it's then referred to later in the public comments, and that feels awkward.
Okay. So we could table these. I mean, there is a video.
That's a good point.
Right? There is a video
Yeah.
of this. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm so dry.
If we tabled it, Rich, whoever else, would have more opportunity to think that through about what the correction could be, or we could look at the video, because I certainly didn't spend as much time on the minutes as I did on the budget.
Sure. So, does that...
We do that. I actually agree with Rich's comment, but I don't know if we have time requirements for us to post the minutes, and they can't be posted until we approve them. I just want to make sure we're not in violation of any kind of requirements or policies.
If I can address that, she's absolutely right. There are certainly recommendations, I think, under open meetings law. I feel she makes a good point about there is an emphasis about 2 weeks in particular. But I think we can also post draft minutes if we need to.
Right. And our district clerk is shaking her head.
Right. Just if they're clearly posted as draft, and because certainly we want people to know the gist of the meeting, even if it's not.
Okay, so then we should table it, though, so it stays draft. So I need a motion to table the minutes and a second. And I have a second, so Sarah and Rich. All in favor of tabling these minutes? Okay, we'll pass it. All opposed?
I didn't hear Rich's comments, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay, and Joanna's going to abstain. So you have 5 anyway. So we will discuss it again at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Terrific.
Let's move to.
Are you looking at sending what it is you would like?
I am not.
I'm
Is
not
the
exactly sure what it is that you want changed.
I mean,
If you could each tell me what it is. you
sure,
want.
personally, I can go through, I remember the things that I had brought up, and I do remember the responses. I can't speak for everybody.
Just so I'm clear, because minutes aren't supposed to be he said, she said, it's supposed to be.
I understand,
Adjust.
but
So if you could give me more of what you're looking for that you feel is missing.
sure.
So we'll email you. We'll have a new draft. Everyone will have a
Right.
chance to read
And we'll
that
have a new
and
draft.
review it, and then.
And let me know ahead of time, so when we come here next time, you have a clear vision of that's what you want to do.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Betty.
So let's move to the approval of the treasurer's report. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? And we'll go to the report of the superintendent.
Okay, so I'm going to reserve my report for the budget presentation.
Okay.
Because that's fairly dense and really all that, most of what's been happening now. So I'm going to defer to that. Are you going to talk about sports night? Yeah. All right,
Okay.
good.
All right, so
Thank
then we'll move to the report from the SGO. And we have a fill-in today. So if you could stand at the mic or be at Betty's mic. Just so we can hear you and it's recorded. And tell us your name and...
Hi, my name is Brianna Centeno, and I'm the treasurer of the student government. I'm filling in for Lindsay and Emily today as they just left for their foreign exchange trips. The Spain and Italy trips just left yesterday, and everyone is extremely excited to spend the next few weeks soaking in European culture. In addition, next week there is a music trip to Portugal. Many students from the band, orchestra, and chorus will be going and performing for locals. Next week, we are also starting a Valentine's Day fundraiser. There will be Valentine's Day themed lollipops sold for $1 each. Students and teachers will be able to send them to each other, and the money raised from this will go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Finally, we have sports night coming up, and this day is very exciting for everyone at the high school. This day will likely be changed from Wednesday, February 28th to Thursday, March 1st. Each grade is collecting canned food and recycled bottles and cans as a way to gain points for their team. If students don't want to participate in the actual events, they can get involved and gain points for their team through poster making or donating cans and bottles to the recycling drive. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you.
So if I could just build on that for a second for sports night. So the SGO reached out to me to speak with me about the scheduling of sports night. And so on the district calendar, it's scheduled for Wednesday. And the SGO is really feeling like they would like to have an extra day of preparation. And apparently it has historically many times been on Thursday.
Yes.
And so they asked me if that would be possible. Now I said, why are you asking me if that would be possible? It's not my decision to make when you have sports night, but apparently it's in this building, and it is also night that we have a board meeting. So I did some checking around, and there have been many times in the past where you've had sports night happening simultaneously with a board meeting. So we don't have a conflict with space, and we don't have a conflict with the facility. We might have a conflict with people who might want to be in the same place at the same time. So if we so in terms of logistics, it can work. If there is a preference by the board to either, so the location I think is less of an issue. If the board would like to move the budget meeting from Thursday to Wednesday or some other time, we can also do that as well. But I wanted to have that discussion with you, and but we can absolutely make it work for
In the
your schedule
building.
for the night that you're already scheduled. Yes.
If it weren't a budget meeting, I would have no problem with moving the board meeting. But I think when it's on the calendar, people are used to it Thursday, and you're talking about a budget, I would not be in favor of moving the board meeting.
All right, I feel similarly.
You don't want to do it.
I'm concerned about moving the
I am
day,
too.
particularly on a calendar that we announce,
Sure.
a year in advance. The location, I think
Sure.
we could get the word out.
I'm not happy about it, but I agree. Okay, any other comments? All right, so moved.
You're all set? Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we'll move to the regular business, and you will do your presentation.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Would you like us to stay here?
I can stay here because we'll put it up on
There?
there. So if you need to,
Okay.
if you feel like you can see it, but you can see it better from there, then by all means you may move. Okay, so hello everybody. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Peter Girizzo. I'm the new superintendent, and what I am presenting to you tonight is the first proposal of the 2018-19 budget, which, believe it or not, the process gets started in October of the year preceding the budget. So it's about a 6-month process that we engage in on the study in building what we need, and some of it is still in motion. We'll talk about some of those factors. But as you know, the North Shore Schools motto is discovering your dreams. So when we start building a budget, the first thing that we think about, in addition to sort of the general nuts and bolts, are how do we fund our schools in ways that help us to advance our core mission. And that comes back to every conversation that we have through every budget process, every budget meeting that we have. So we're looking at how do these budget requests and how does the monies that we're asking for support our mission and support the shared valued outcomes. So when we first set out, we had some priorities that we set out to accomplish, and one was to remain sensitive to the fiscal pressures that the community is facing right now. We wanted to address all of our instructional program needs that would be in line with the district's shared valued outcomes. We wanted to continue to provide a strong program of professional development. We wanted to stay at or below the New York State tax cap, and I'll talk with you a little bit about how that works in a few minutes. Always complying with all state and federal mandates, continuing to upgrade our technology infrastructure, and maintaining our plants and facilities to provide a safe and healthy learning environment. So those are really key when we talk about the role that our facilities play in the instructional program, and oftentimes districts will take that for granted, but it really is essential. When you look around you and you have beautiful, well-kept, clean spaces, that really matters and has a direct impact on student learning. So as I discussed to you, we start this process in September, October. At that point in time, I share the district goals and assumptions with the administrative team. They start to think about the budget requests that are important to them. They're forecasting out initiatives that they are working on, building on what was in the past. And then they start at zero, and they start to build their budget requests. So you'll go through the budget and you'll see, well, how could you really say you're building a zero-based budget when you have a line that is exactly the same as last year? And some of those lines are a result of, it could be one of two reasons. One, it's a set of pens, pencils, paper, things like that have similar costs from year to year, and we need a similar amount. And some of it, you will see later, was that the initial budget request could have been much higher, and I cut it back to where it was. So if you go down to the very bottom, you'll see that since the initial budget was presented to me, I've taken out $2,077,257.82. Those were cuts that I made before they got here. So as we go through all those priorities, looking at the SVOs, looking at the district goals, looking at our district initiatives, we then also simultaneously are looking at actual expenditures that have happened over the past 5 years. So when we look at a particular code, we're saying, okay, where did we spend on that code over the past 5 years? Have we overspent it? Have we underspent it? Are we on target? There are some codes that are very hard to project. We're going to talk about them tonight. Fuel, oil, electricity, lighting, water, all of these things that we just simply don't know what they're going to look like. So what helps us to put a number that's viable on those lines is to look at the 5-year average. We also look at our contractual obligations for each labor contract, and we project out those salaries. So the salaries that we've projected in the budget are actual real salaries as they relate to the collective bargaining units that we have. We look at the prior year's budget and to look at those to make sure those requested items were actually done. So the things that we set out to do, did we actually do them? And then we look at new staffing. So you'll see as we go through the program tonight, there are some additional staffing adds in the budget. There are also some staffing reductions in the budget for next year. We look at our trends to project out health costs, and then by the time all that comes together, then we start to tweak it and massage it and go through it again and go through it again and go through it again until we get to the point where we are tonight, where I can have a draft superintendent's budget for the board to begin to review. And so until the board adopts a budget, it remains the superintendent's budget. And then once the board adopts that budget in March or April, and they need to adopt a budget in that time frame, then it becomes the board's budget. So what will happen from now until the time that the board actually does adopt a budget is there'll be some ins, there'll be some outs. We will review those every time that we come together. So tonight we're going to look at a certain set of lines. The board will then give us some direction on what to do with those lines after we go through them. And if there are any adds or deletions or adjustments in any way, we will bring those back to you at the next meeting. You'll see what impact that has on the budget itself and the proposed levy. So even as we are building the budget, believe it or not, there are many things that we just simply don't know, and they are projections, and they will remain projections in the budget. State aid is only a projection at this point. We are using the governor's runs at this point. The legislature, by law, has to enact a budget by April 1st. And they've been reasonably good about that over the past bunch of years, so that's helped us in our budget process, but right now we don't know. Generally speaking, those state aid numbers go up, but we simply don't know. There could be economic and political environment changes that happen, midstream that we don't know about. Several years ago, I know North Shore was like many other districts advocating for the restoration of the gap elimination adjustment. So if you remember back to 2008, there was the financial crisis. Governor Patterson unilaterally took state aid back from districts, and that became to be known as the gap elimination aid. And so by the time all those years went by to get that aid fully restored, we were actually restored back to our 2008 levels. So you have this depression in state aid, but that can happen. And so that's an unknown that we can't necessarily anticipate for. In this moment, we do not know our health insurance costs for 2019. We will have that probably by the time the board adopts a budget. If we have unanticipated health and safety needs that come up throughout the year, they do. We have an issue with a building that needs to be addressed. If you recall, back in the fall, we had an issue with the middle school electrical feed. If you remember that back in October, that required monies that we needed to expend to get that initially repaired, and then as we go through the budget, you'll see the long-term repair in the 2018-19 budget related to that issue. Student enrollment may change. We have students register all the time, coming and going. Kindergarten registration just started, so we have projections for kindergarten registration based on the demographic studies that we have, but we simply don't know what our final kindergarten numbers will look like, and those will change into the summer. Student services may change based on annual reviews of IEPs, so we do our best to forecast out what our needs in special education are for the next year, but keeping in mind that the annual review process is largely just getting started. And so we build my philosophy, and I know the district's philosophy has always been the IEPs. The chair people go into the IEP process not thinking about what's in the budget, thinking about what's in the best needs of students. So so there may be some shifts and changes in there. And then while student course selection in grades 7 and 8 is very solid, grade 6 is almost pretty solid. We're waiting for language selections that will have an impact on some staffing for us. And 9 through 12, the high school scheduling process is in motion. So as that takes shape, we will keep you up to date on what those enrollment projections look like. But I have fairly solid enrollment projections for K through 5, barring kindergarten. I have reasonably solid projections that I've gone through with Rob Dennis for the middle school, and then for the high school, that is right now far less certain. So we'll work through that over the course of the next several weeks. Hello. Okay, so let me take you through the large expenditures in the budget. There are several categories, and they include general support, which is the lines that we'll go through tonight. Our instructional program is another component, pupil transportation, community service, employee benefits, and our debt service. All told, when you add up all of the lines in those 5 large categories, the budget that I'm proposing is a $104,868,519, and that represents a $2,755,4 increase, budget-to-budget increase of 2.698. Now I'm going to talk with you a little bit more about some of the details on this. That 2.698 is the budget-to-budget increase, not the tax levy increase. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Where are the drivers in the budget? And some of them we have very little control over. And so of these 8 codes, the major budget drivers are related to litigation. So you see, why is the board's line going up so much? That has to do with the LIPA litigation and the New York American Water, the pub and the website. The supervision of instruction and regular instruction deals with contractual salaries. Tuition for St. Christopher's. St. Christopher's is a state-operated school that receives students who are placed there. While that number represents a big increase, that money does come back to us in revenue at a later time. And then you'll see that there is funding for instructional technology. The teacher's retirement system is up $400,000, and health insurance is up $836,000. So some of these things we don't even have a lot of control over unless we're looking at staffing levels. So the interesting number for you to take a look at here is, does this have a, yes. So the budget drivers, these 8 broad codes, comprise $3.3 million of increase to the budget. And if we go back, if you remember, the total increase that I'm proposing is 2.755. So how does, we'll get into how one does that. But those eight codes represent a higher increase than we're asking the community to think about for the entire budget. And what that has mostly to do with, so I think I talked to all this, right? Yes. So the contracts, we have increased enrollment in, so you'll see Glenwood Landing's enrollment has grown over the course of several years, and as the Glenwood Landing's enrollment has grown, we've had to think about how to keep pace with special areas and language support and reading support to support the increased enrollment that's happening in that building in the increased section. So that you'll see some of that in the budget. The retirement system contribution is set at 10.63. That's a real number in the budget. And we talked about the other things here. So this is just a pie chart to show you of those 8 budget drivers, what comprises the largest component of that, and you'll see that's instruction. 45%. Okay. So where are there staffing cuts in this budget? There are a reduction of 1.5 behavioral specialists, where there are currently 4.5 behavior specialists in the district, and we are reducing that to 1.5. We feel that the combination of a full-time social worker and a full-time psychologist, that we are more than ready to meet the mental health needs of our students with really looking a little bit more carefully at those behaviorists and really using the behaviorist to build capacity among the staff. So when they come in and if a student is having trouble or a class is having trouble with a behavioral issue, that the behaviorist comes in, enables those teachers and those children to move forward with, and then comes back as needed, but isn't necessarily needing to be there on a regular basis. We've reduced 4 teacher aides across the district. There are 3 fewer elementary teachers in the program for next year related to enrollment. So there are, and we'll get to this, there are 4 sections of 5th grade at Glen Head, and we are anticipating 3 sections of kindergarten coming in, so that's 1 section. The same is true at Glenwood Landing. And at Seacliff, there is the rising 5th grade class is currently split in 3 sections, and we are proposing that those be in 2 sections of 22 next year rather than 3 sections of 14 and 15 or whatever they are. Okay, so and we'll talk all about those things as we get deeper into the budget, but what I have done, because if you remember back to how staffing and enrollment can be a roller coaster of a race, it is really important that we have contingency built into the budget to support that. So of those 3 positions, we've allocated 2 of them as what are as contingency or safety positions. So if enrollment in any one of the schools spikes in any one grade level, we will have the resources to support the additional sections should that come to bear. We've also reduced the budget by a half-time district-wide maintainer, and we've reduced a half-time bus monitor. So all told, that's about $500,000 in staff reductions. And then we have some new staffing that we're recommending into the program, and there is a full-time Mandarin teacher to compensate for the increased enrollment at Glenwood Landing, so there's a half-time to accommodate those children. There is a 0.3 Mandarin teacher at the middle school to accommodate increased enrollment, and there is a 0.2 at the high school. So as the Mandarin program grows, it goes up another level, and we need to add those sections into the master schedule. So if you look at the classes, it actually adds up to 0.9. Why it's a 1.0 request is because we need to accommodate for travel time, because that person will travel between buildings. So that's where that additional piece comes in. We also looked at the reading at Glenwood Landing, and because of the increased student enrollment there, we felt that we needed to add a part-time reading teacher to support kids who were struggling. And also we needed to add a 0.2 general music teacher. So over the course of the past, I think it was, Olivia, 4 or 5 years, the enrollment has risen, and we haven't added to the support staff over at Glenwood Landing to accommodate for that. And lastly, there is so Dr. Z at Seacliff is short monitors on the playground at lunchtime, and so he has asked us to include a halftime monitor for additional coverage at the lunch periods, and that is also included in the budget. Okay, so how do we balance? So remember, I said to you all the budget drivers added up to more than what I was actually asking the board to think through. How does that happen? Well, as I've explained to you over the course of time, is that the budget is a 2 stories. So you have the expense budget, and then you have the revenue budget. And so the revenue budget offsets those expenses. So if you take a look at this number, that comprises almost $1.6 million in revenue to offset where we are. And there are split properties. So there are, for those of you who are not aware of what a split property is, we have split properties in Glen Cove, in Roslyn, in Locust Valley, And when you have a home that rests in 2 school districts, it doesn't matter how much of your property rests in one or the other, you get to choose. So for those families who live in Roslyn and choose to send their kids to North Shore, we then bill that back to the Roslyn schools, as we do with Glen Cove, as we do with Locust Valley, and as they would do with us as well. Okay, and we keep track of where those kids are. There are all the pilots. So there are the 2 peaking stations next to the transportation facilities. The former local properties, those comprise a really large portion of the pilots that we have. And for those of you who are not aware, PILOT stands for Payments in Lieu of Taxes. So we don't like pilots because they are fixed costs that are not tied to assessed value of a property. They're negotiated and we generally don't like them. So, but they are there. State aid comprises a major portion of our revenue, and that number there that you will see is the number that was in the governor's initial run. And interestingly enough, you will also see that that number is lower. So when you look at the runs from last year versus the runs to this year, the total number of state aid actually looks higher. But when we actually balance that against the money that we received cash in hand from the state as it relates to state aid, that number is actually lower. And that relates to capital projects that were the final sign-off. The state will not give you your state aid until the final project is fully signed off on and submitted. And so those projects were delayed and those funds were not submitted to we'll get the money eventually, but it did not come in the form of state aid last year. So you'll see that is actually a reduction. And then we bring in money from fund balance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So that's money that we carry over from one budget into the next to offset the levy. We have the Marcelino grant, the Marcelino-Levine grant, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes what the plan for all this is, but we have $800,000 of that reserve money that we're bringing into the budget to offset the levy. We have the closed tax cert that we have not used yet. That's additional reserve money. We're going to start bringing that into the budget. You'll see the plan for that over the next 10 or 12 years. And then we have what are called interfund transfers. And so all of that together gives you the gives us $86 million in revenue. So when you look at what is the increase to the taxpayer, the tax levy increase that the voters would vote on at this moment, it's 1.891%. That's the tax levy that I'm proposing tonight. Okay, talk to you about all these. Okay, so what are the challenges with revenues? Obviously, interest income. So as our interest income is down it's the same way when you put money in your savings account, the interest rates are very, very low. We have the same issue. The tax cap legislation, which sets the levy limit at 2%. But then you can add the growth factors, and so this year's tax levy is actually 2.24. We could actually ask the community for 2.24%. I was with some superintendents today. Some of their maximum allowable levies are in the mid 3%, and believe it or not, some of them are actually thinking about doing it. So we could ask for as much as 2.24. We're asked 2.24. The CPI is related to all of this. The CPI for this year is set at 2.13, and we're actually, like I said, we're actually asking for the 1.89. Okay, so this is for those of you who are new to the district or are new to how the reserves have been used in the past. These are the Marcelino and Levine, Chuck Levine grants. The district had $5.4 million that it received over 2 years in the form of state aid. And so that has been sitting in reserves, and the plan for that was to use it over time to offset the levy. Mostly as it related to the Glenwood Landing power plant, but it was at the district's discretion to use it how it be used. But it has been used relating to the Glenwood power plant. So back in 14-15, you'll see the district allocated about $170,000, then brought that up to $600,000. Brought that up to $1 million for 2 years, and now it's time for us to start bringing that back. So we hit the peak of $1 million. Now we start to bring it back from $800,000, and you will see over the course of the next several years that is the projected use of the Levine, of the Marcelino Levine reserve funds. Now that could change depending on what the future boards decide to do, but this is a map out of what we think could work. The trick with using reserves is that you want to use them in a way so that when they are gone, because eventually when you use them, they're gone, that you don't actually ever feel that they're not there anymore. So that's why we take it down very, very gradually. So we assume the offset of that as we move forward. And so you'll see this in graph form here. So you'll see back in 14-15 where it started. We've hit the plateau, and now we will start to bring that down. And you'll see by 2025-26, that funding will no longer be available to the district. And so I want to make sure that as we use that, the board never feels like they're heading off a cliff with a revenue source. And so we'll do the same thing with the tax certiorari reserve. So this is the first year that we're using it, and we're planning to bring in $350,000, and then by the time 2024-25 comes, that will expend all the funds, and you also will see that in chart form as well. So we bring it in, we bring it up, and then we start to bring it down. Okay, and so this is my visual for the evening. So when you use reserves, it is very, very important that I always call this the melting ice approach. So when you are using a pot of funds that have an end, it's important for you to use it like it's an ice cube, right? And the reason for that is why you let it melt very nice and slowly. So when it's gone, you can sort of see it happening, and you never feel like that ice cube or berg is being ripped from under you and you don't have it anymore. So it's just an analogy to think about when using reserves. Sometimes we all of us, including myself, as we're trying to get the revenue and the expenditures to match, I'll say let's take more, and Olivia will say time out. Right? We want to make sure we go slow, because what we use this year, we have to make sure that we have for next year, because when that source, that financial source runs out, we either have to get it from the taxpayers or we have to look at program and staffing reductions. That's really the only two options that we have. So hence the melting ice cube. Okay, so this is the summary of of where we are. The total revenues that I'm proposing to the board this evening are $18,781,973.14, and the total tax levy that we would be proposing to the taxpayers would be $86,086,545.69. And just to put that into perspective of what if the board were inclined to put the maximum levy forward to the community without having to override the tax cap, it's $86,384,25.50, which represents a difference of about $300,000 between what you may levy without an override and currently what I'm proposing to you tonight. Okay. We're almost there, guys. So just hang in with me for a second. So in how taxes are levied and apportioned in Nassau County, are through a 4-class system. So there are Class 1 is for Class 1 are single-family home owners, which is probably all of you who are here this evening, and Class 2 are co-ops and condos. So those two are where the people live in town. Class 3 are utilities, and Class 4 are commercial properties. So what happens is the county guarantees the levy. So when the community approves the levy, so if in May, somewhere close to this $86 million is approved by the taxpayers, we then submit that to the county. The county then guarantees that we will get all $86 million of that money. Where it comes from is based on how it is apportioned within these 4 classes. So if you take a look here, you'll see that in Class 1, there are 5,832 homes in Class 1, and there are 599 condos and co-ops. 61 condos and co-ops. And so the average, based on the proposed budget that I have here tonight, the average levy increase, a dollar increase to the homeowners across all those would be $319 for the year. And for Class 2 properties, $599 across the year. Where the LIPA situation becomes tricky is in Class 3, and why some of you who are tuned into the water issues that exist in the Seacliff Water District, that all relates to how those assessments are running in and out of Class 3 and Class 1 and 2, and it relates to a law called 1803 and 1803A. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but these are the numbers for our residents. So if you were looking at the impact on, so this current budget, in the way that it is constructed, what would be the impact to a homeowner with an assessed market with the market value home? So if your home is valued at $500,000, the annual increase to your taxes over the year would be approximately $293. Now that's an average, right? So that doesn't account for star and basic star deductions. If your home is valued at $700,000, we're projecting that your annual increase would be roughly $409 over the course of the year. $1 million home would be $585 over the course of the year, and a home valued at $1.5 million would be $877 increase over the course of the year. Okay, and so if anybody wanted some help with how to calculate what that would look like for your individual home based on what your house is valued at the next meeting we'll do a little tutorial on that, but you could also give us a call and we'll help you work through that as well. Okay. Questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow. Thank you for all the work that you and your staff did for this tremendous amount of information. This was wonderful, and I know you worked very hard on it.
Thank you very much.
We're going to have questions from the board first. Now, we had discussed covering certain sections. Do you want to do questions on the PowerPoint first? Or shall we just go into our sections?
So tonight we were planning to cover the overview that Rob and Olivia and I worked on. Mm-hmm. We have enrollment to review with the board, and then the general support lines, so John Hall's facility lines, right, transportation lines, and then the special projects that we have, which is what are called transfer to capital. So we can talk with those. So we could either do, it really is up to the board. So we can do the line by line, and then maybe some of those questions will be answered as it relates to line by line.
I think we should do that. Otherwise, we could get mired in broader questions.
That
so
works.
Let's do that, and we'll hope that, and if anybody has any burning questions from the board that we don't cover, We'll make sure we cover them.
Absolutely. And what we will do tonight is, to the extent that we can answer your questions, we absolutely will. And to the extent that we cannot, because we don't have that information with us, Olivia and I and Rob will write it down and make sure we get it back to you in the next meeting. So I'm going to, Olivia, you take very, very good notes. So I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to cross-reference with you as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So no, that's great, and that's wonderful. That will allow us to, giving the answer that you will get back to us is a perfectly acceptable answer.
Terrific.
Okay. Okay. So let's start. What section? Direct us. What section?
So what I can do firstly is just in the and just so the anybody who is here tonight knows, and anybody who might be watching knows, that we've reframed the whole budget book in than what it was. So what we wanted to do was, for tonight, there are line by line copies of the budget that you are welcome to take from the side of the room. And then tomorrow we will have the full budget book posted to our website, so that will be open and accessible to anybody. And what you will see, what I've asked the administrators to do this year was, in addition to just working on their line by lines and the specifics related to those, we also worked on narrative. So there was really a story behind and a real, I believe to be a strong rationale for what's in the lines.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So
let's go to section.
So we might want to just start with enrollment.
Yep.
Which
is tab under instructional C?
It
or
is.
No.
It is. It's yep, instructional C.
Okay. Okay, so trustees.
Page 1 under tab C.
Sorry.
Tab C, go to the first page.
Tab C, page 1. Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
So, as people on the board know, and as people in the community may know who attend these meetings a lot, at the beginning of 2016, we conducted a 5-year study of enrollment that at the time, I think we felt was a firm we had used before, but left us, at least me, with a lot of questions. This year we asked for a new look at that based on 1 year's change, and for me at least, it confirmed a lot of my suspicions that initial enrollment study was not giving us the data that we wanted. So I went through and I did want to share a couple things that I came up with, because there were issues with that study, I think. For example, their 2016 study, I have my notes, predicted a 5-year total enrollment drop of 5.1%, but only 1 year later, now that they've seen the actual numbers, they've already revised that to only a 2.1% drop, so they've already more than halved their projected drop. And again, that's in the context of Seacliff having 72 kids in their kindergarten class. In 2016, they predicted enrollment decline to a total enrollment decline to 1118, with a slight increase to 2122, and we're already at 1132. I'm sorry, this is for the for K through 5, which is a 2.6 increase. So they predicted flat, and we're now already at a 2.5% increase, and now they're predicting a 5.5% increase over 5 years. They predicted, as I said, 52 kindergartners for Seacliff, and we have 72. And I think it supports what we all see in the community, which is that as communities, and all communities, turn over, people are moving into this district with kids. And I think something we also see a lot, 2 kids seem to be the norm of yesterday, and now there's a lot of 3-kid families moving in here. So I think the enrollment numbers that I see here, I'm not going to go into any more detail on what they've been projected here, but I'm very concerned that we are under predicting what's going to actually be happening to our schools. And I'm also concerned about this number at Glenwood Landing, where they're predicting 3 classes of 21 in kindergarten. I realize there's a fine line there, and I'm not going to go any further in saying what I individually think, but I think that we all do feel that preserving small classes at that young age, so we can have the kind of educational experience that provides time for students to be 5 in those classes without having 21, or if these numbers are even off a little bit, more in those classes. So I understand we want to keep those classes small, but as we go through the budget and talk about those things, class size is, especially in that kindergarten state, of the utmost importance.
I agree. And so what I would say is, we are using those demographic projections because that's frankly all we have at this point. The registrants that we have thus far, so I can give you an update on where we are with this. So there were roughly 19 students registered in kindergarten at Glenwood Landing thus far. 14 or 15 at Seacliff and 12 at Glen Head. And this is
just at the beginning.
This is a very, very beginning of the process, and so there's a long way to go. But to your point, Dave, because it is so unpredictable and because there are so many unknowns in this moment, that's why it's important to have those contingency positions in the budget, because you could say we can go with these and just cut those positions, but then if you need them later, you're trying to find other places to find them.
I just want to say to Dave's point that the studies that we do look at children currently in the school district. So
Right.
they'll pull the nursery schools and the pre-Ks, and they'll look at birth records. What it can't account for, and I don't know how you fix this, because I think anyone who's doing this study doesn't know, is the home sales, right?
Exactly.
And even if homes sell, you don't know who's purchasing the home and what age those children are, or if they're even children.
That's right.
For the purchaser. So I don't want people thinking that, that the people who are doing the enrollment study are not utilizing the data. They're utilizing what data they have. It's just that the data available is not precise.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Dave, please.
So on that note, when we talk about projected fourth grade or fifth grade or third grade, they're all based on, in every case, exactly the same number that's currently enrolled in the year before. I'm not needing it now, but do we have any data on the growth and or reduction in sizes historically of what happens? If we have a cohort that has, for lack of a better number, 20 times 9, 200 kids entering in kindergarten, does that number generally swell over a 12-year period? Are students who start in private schools for elementary coming into our district? Are they finding after junior high that they do in droves want to leave for private schools? What's the history, so we know if we're starting with 197, is that number going to end up being 10, 12 years later 197 graduates, or is it more likely based on history to be 230 graduates?
That's a terrific question. Go ahead.
I think we've seen a little bit of that, but we don't have nearly enough of that, because it was like a year or two ago that we got some graphs of that when we were looking at how the cohorts were moving through. That in the elementary schools we had some data, but it's still incomplete, showing that kids keep moving into the district. Third, fourth grade, second grade, they're still showing up, but then there is a little bit of a shift later on, right, with kids who might choose then to go to private school later on. So we have a little bit of that, and that was the problem we were trying to point out with the enrollment projections, was that they wanted to look at a lot of live birth data, and we were pointing at data that says, but we have so many kids showing up in the middle of elementary school, right, which led to this sort of relook.
Right.
But, there were outside factors. So, and there used to be a very significant number of students who went to private school for high school. When the stock market crashed in 2008, we had a huge influx of private students back. So there's so many factors that you can't account for, and even in years where we've laid off elementary school teachers based upon forecast of a decline in enrollment, there's absolutely no problem generally hiring some of those teachers back. They do have preference. We indeed did that. I know we hired back teachers who were not available, who were laid off. So, obviously if there's a surge that we didn't anticipate, we have the resources to accommodate that.
Okay, so let's Want to move on?
Sure.
Okay.
As long as there are no more questions.
Okay. So let's move on to, do you want to do the school counseling? Or where, I can't keep track of how you wanted to do it. I'm going to let you do this.
No worries. Let's take this out. All right. So we took care of enrollment.
Someone's gonna get their fingers caught in that.
I know.
They're like crocodiles.
Yeah.
It's a badge of honor. Okay, so why don't we look at the general support lines, which in the line by line starts on page 1, and we can start to go through those.
So that's the tab for,
So if you look at
if you look at the Board of Education tab.
correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions?
Sure.
Comments? You did make it clear that the Board of Education includes lots of other things. It's certainly not our giant salaries, which, in case anyone doesn't know, we're all volunteers. None paid, so.
So why don't we take you through these codes? So the 1010 400 codes include arbitration in case we were to need to hire an arbiter, $1,000. We have $40,000 in legal hearings. There is general counsel retainer of $45,000. There is $8,000 for consultants and special projects for the board, should you need them. There is $1,500 for mandated fiscal oversight training for new board members and for any training that the board chooses to engage in. Your annual memberships for school boards and so belonging to New York State School Board dues, that's $11,460. There are fees that we pay to keep our notaries current, and journals and publications of $500. There's money for the LIPA hearing. That's $100,000 in there, and that's where the big increase comes related to this. So there's a $30,000 increase. School board activities is $1,000 should you choose to engage in other activities, and then supplies through my office to support you of $5,000, paper, toner, and binders came out of the general supply, right?
Okay.
So
I don't think we need to go through every line in every section.
Okay, that's fine.
But we can ask questions.
That's great.
Okay.
And then so the remaining funds in the 1010 codes relate to the district clerk salary, supplies to run the annual election, and then all of your district meetings and the election, and then there's a software management system that the board uses. Betty, remind me what the name of that is again. The Bold Systems. Thank you. That funds that as well.
Okay.
So those are the board codes.
Any questions, trustees? Sarah?
Sure. So to me, this does seem like a good example of where we put a lot of thought into every line. You know, the budget draft is up somewhat over what the budget was for the current year, but it's still below what it was in 16-17. And so I think that shows, right, we're not just moving our numbers along, we're really putting a lot of thought to what's behind them. My only question then really was about, and it's a small number, but we budgeted very little on the arbitration line, and it's not a huge budget mover one way or the other. So, but it made me concerned that we had an actual expenditure of almost $5,000 in 16-17, but that we're budgeting $1,000 for this year. Is that, there's just no way to know what's going to happen?
No, and when we look at if you look at the 5-year expense on this, there.
Which is where? Okay, thank you. Because I didn't see that.
So it's here.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Did you get
Yes,
the new
thank
section?
you. Okay.
Okay, so on the 5-year expense for that line, there are years that you've spent nothing, and there are years that one year you spend $4,800, and then another years you've spent around $2,000. So we feel like that number seems to be fine, and if we need to find it from
Okay.
somewhere else, that we would be able to make it work.
Thank you, the 5 years, thank you.
You're welcome.
So does this packet that you just gave us go at the end?
The
Front is a new table of contents,
Okay.
and there's a couple of new tabs to help you with your narrative.
Oh, I see.
And the very last is the 5-year, which can go in the back of your binder with the tab.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we can talk about this.
we'll help you put it together
You'll
at
help
the
us
end.
put it together. But for now, we can put the 5-year at the end, and that way we can all refer to that.
If you do that at the end of the meeting, I'll take care of that before you.
Okay.
I think we can
All right,
handle
thank
it.
you.
Thank you, though.
Thank you. All right. Great. Let's move to. I just lost my place.
Page 2.
So what I would suggest to the board, because this is our first time doing this together, right?
Right.
Is if there are suggestions or edits or things that the board wishes to add or change, just please let us know and we'll make those notes. And then the next time we meet, you'll get a revised budget with whatever you suggest.
It was very helpful when you directed us to areas.
Great.
That was helpful.
Great.
So,
Okay.
okay, so let's move to your next.
So the next lines that we can take a look at are the central administration lines, and these include salaries for the superintendent's salary, the salaries related to my office, meetings and memberships for my office, and supplies for my office. And then in addition to that, there are the salaries for the business official, the business office clerical staff, overtime as it relates to the business office, and you'll see that represents an $8,000 reduction. Substitute clericals, bidding services and magazines and microfiching and postage and travel and reimbursement, supplies, postage, BOCES services as they relate to E-rate and record retention and scanning of records and state aid planning and our copier lease, all for the central office. Okay, that's on page 2.
Page 2. Okay, so then any questions? On page 3, I see there's an increase, and I think you can explain this public information, other expenses increase. Is this related to the webmaster changes?
It is. What line are you looking at?
I'm just looking at the whole line. You're pointing right at it. This
Okay,
one.
very good.
This
So
one.
1480, 490. So the large increase to that line relates to the website. So we've had to convert the whole website over to be ADA compliant, and that has required our webmaster to spend a lot of time and energy doing that. And then we're working with the buildings as well.
maintain it.
So that has to be maintained. So that funding for making that happen and maintaining that was not something that we knew to budget for back for the 17-18 school year. So now that we know that it's an expense, we've built it
have to
into
increase, right?
we've built it into the budget for you.
Okay. Any other questions?
And that continues on to the next page too with the 10,000 to close caption.
Exactly.
Right.
Because otherwise we can't post videos of the meetings.
Exactly.
And again, non-voluntary mandated expenses.
That's exactly
Right,
right.
it's a very good example of, $20,000.
Right.
That's money, it's perfectly well spent, but it is absolutely a mandated
Right.
expense. I was going to say, likewise, that we are going to spend $18,000 just on the mechanics behind our tax anticipation notes, because we have to borrow money while we wait to get the money that we're supposed to get every year.
Exactly.
Just another example, even though this year in particular, we know the town basically already has it. Because of the prepaid taxes.
Right.
is
Right.
sitting on it.
Exactly.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to central services and facilities.
Great.
Okay. Any questions?
Okay, you ready,
We
John?
have John here with us.
All right, and what I would do is, so each of these lines that we'll go through, and this comprises a fairly substantial dollar number in the budget. It includes all of your facilities planning, all of the special projects. There are all the capital projects. So what John has done really very nicely in your book is he's listed out all of those projects by category in narrative. We can talk about those a little bit, but it might be helpful to just go through, some of what's here. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep.
Dave?
I guess, when you're looking at these things, obviously programmatically, that's the part you don't want to have to make any cuts. But things like, I guess I would just ask, this box truck and this lawnmower, those are something that is needed this year, or that $70,000 we spent last year. So let's find the most pressing need to spend that $70,000 similarly. But is it really possible to spend zero and get by with that same tractor for another year? Sorry, John.
So Olivia, John, do you want to speak to that? Because we had these conversations.
We currently have a white box truck from the 90s transporting board equipment when you go on the road, so to the buildings. Brake lines are rotting out, the front end is rotted. It's just a truck that's seeing the end of its life. It gets to the point where we're throwing good money at bad to keep it going. It's now time to replace that truck. It's not a matter of because I had truck money last year, we're finding another truck. This is something we anticipated and knew we needed to do this year to keep things going. Same thing with the lawnmowers. We've come a long way. Transportation's been wonderful at servicing our equipment, saving us money. But at this point, parts are harder to get, expensive to get, and now it's time to replace that machine. Plus, when the machine's down, we now use a smaller machine to cut. Our staff is now working longer. They just have to so we're trying to really be. There were 8 things in that category that we said we would.
Okay.
I need them to.
But you can't wait.
Really have to do that. Interestingly, a little story, District 1 that I know a few years ago blew up replacing a truck. Truck drove across the railroad tracks, broke in half, stopped the train.
Oh my God.
So school district on the front page of the I don't want that.
It's the same question we face in our own personal
Right.
budgeting.
Absolutely.
Of when is enough? So the question is, from 2014 to 15 to 16 to 17, is this the year where it finally isn't? You're saying,
Yeah.
That truck broke down Saturday night at the back of Glenville High School.
okay,
We had to pay a mechanic around it.
Yeah.
I got you.
And we've also tried to maintain the equipment in buildings and ground, and because it's helped us to reduce labor cost over time. Our guys, even though we've increased the square footage of the places we have to clean, and we cut down on staff some years ago, because we've given them equipment. Even you can see a ride-on, floor scrubber. This is all to make them, do more with less, and it's really been helpful.
Okay.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I do think that was a good example of how
I do.
we're planning and we're looking forward and there are these 10 things and let's pick 2, but that we're always trying to get something done so that there's no bubble. For me, when I look at this section, so we have these sections called special projects, which I don't know, that's what it's called, but it's not particularly descriptive. Like we're talking, I'm on page 11 in case.
Okay.
Because we're talking about, generally we call them special projects, but we're saying significant things that need to be fixed, that cost a lot of money, and this is the area of the budget that we put those things in. So overall in this budget, we're going to spend about $200,000 less this year on those kinds of significant repairs than we did last year. I'm not saying there's a good solution to this. It concerns me because I've seen the pipeline of repairs and things that need to get fixed, so I'm always concerned about how much we're able to get done this year versus how much we're going to have to get done down the road. And for example, one of those things that we're postponing is our second phase of upgrading our cabling and our network cabling and our wireless infrastructure, which impacts the productivity of all the students and all the faculty. That is a very expensive project. I'm not saying no, but we've postponed that, and we've cut these special projects by $200,000. And so I'm concerned that we're going to get stuck with how much stuff we need to fix or upgrade in the future. And one of the reasons that I'm concerned about it is not just this lowering this line by $200,000, but also is the fact that when we get at the end of the year, when we have money left over in the budget, right, historically, we've been able to say, okay, so what do we do with this? And sometimes it's fix something that's come up during the year. Part of it's that. Part of it, you know, goes back into the budget for the next year. And on the revenue side, we're aggressively scheduling, I think, the budget surplus into next year, which I think is going to leave us less to fix things. So I think whatever's here is really, correct me if I'm wrong, I think whatever's here is what's happening. And we're going to be spending less on our infrastructure, both on things we know are broken and there are things we're trying to be forward-looking about with the cabling. And I don't see any way, we're not going to have any leeway on that, is what it looks like to me when we look at the whole budget, including the revenue side. I don't have a solution, but I am very concerned about those projects.
Let me go up to the point regarding the special project. You look at the numbers that we did not really reduce that by $200,000. What we did was if you do two things like electricity. You look at the expense over a 6-year period, and because of the changes to LED and all that kind of thing, we've been able to cut those lines a little bit. So the
Reduction is actually not coming from the special project. We always maintain the special project at the 800 level from year to year. And one of the reasons why we had to defer the cable project was we had to do something about the high school ceiling.
I know, that's in the special project, I see that.
That was a health and safety issue, so we had to bring that ahead of the cabling. We had to do it.
Okay, I'm saying when I subtotal the special project lines, I'm still seeing a drop of the 200,000.
We have almost 500,000, 268, and 37,000.
I'm not
That's
saying we
close.
don't have money in it. I'm saying we have less.
But I do want to point out that we do have an emergency repair reserve. So if something came up that qualified as an emergency repair like we had with the one-room schoolhouse, we're able to tap into that. So if we really had a real health and safety issue that needed to be addressed very immediately, we do have that reserve. So
Absolutely.
I'm not really worried about the 200,000.
I'm talking about the forward-looking piece of stuff that we know we have in the pipeline.
Okay. All right, let's move. If no one else has a question? Yes.
I did have one question. So,
Sure.
water is doubled, and that's based on obviously what we all know. Fuel went up last year. We went from 180 to 435, $100,000 for gas. Now we're down by 50. Are we anywhere near spending that 435 this year in actual expenditure? So theoretically, if we know by the time we adopt this budget that we're just not there, that could be an area?
Absolutely. So what we, it
was cold.
At the end of this month, so really beginning in March, is when we really start to do aggressive fund balance projections for the end of the year. So then once those, really as soon as March 1st comes, we'll start to really very aggressively go line by line through the budget and look at where do we think this is going to go, and then we'll do that monthly and share where we are with the board in that process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So let me just make sure we didn't skip anything here. So if there are any questions on any of the building supplies or the staffing needs, those are all through page 10. And they're all listed out, mop heads and field clay and all that. So we can always come back to this if we need to, but that's the facilities budget, and as you saw, it is down from last year to this year. Okay? Great. All right, so if we look at, if we now move on to transportation, which
43, 44?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you then at some point go back into the narrative, you'll see where all the runs are, how many kids are associated with those runs, what's private, what's what we run ourselves. And so you'll also see that this, in the aggregate, this line is down by almost $37,000 from last year to this year. So we can take the board's questions.
So, a few years ago, I guess there was a change in the law that you didn't have to have enough capacity for everyone who could ride the buses, but you had to have enough capacity for what you, I guess, reasonably thought would be that ridership. And because of that, last year we voted on the expansion of routes for certain middle schoolers, 7th and 8th graders to match 6th graders for parent convenience and to give more kids an opportunity without increasing the cost at all, and the community supported that. One of the things that I was hoping we would do, and I'm not sure if I haven't seen it or if we haven't done it yet, is do a ridership study to see how the buses are actually being used. Are we still sending empty buses around town? Mm-hmm. And we were going to look at those in rain, in snow, in beautiful sunny days, in extreme cold, etc. And I don't know how that informs what we're doing, if that's been done, but I want to make sure that remains a glowing ember.
Absolutely. So we had talked about, I think it was we'll have to go back to the meeting notes, but it was a meeting, I think, in October that we had talked about this here.
Yep.
And that we were going to identify some days. And Michelle, I think, has got those identified.
Changing the mileage had any impact on the ride.
Exactly.
And that's the study that we did.
Okay.
But I think if I understand you correctly, what you are referring to
Here is to do ridership study throughout the district.
I'd like to see how our students are doing it. Look, we have traffic problems. I'd like to get more kids riding the bus. It's better for our community. It's better for pollution. It's better for child safety. But if we simply can't make that horse drink at the water to which we've led it, then maybe...
We should. Well, I think it's interesting because we increase the number of kids who are eligible for the bus, but our transportation costs continue to come down. But that not entirely because of just ridership in our district. We made other changes. We were contracting out 3 routes. We brought them in-house. We saved a lot of money. We've done a lot of things. But with the ridership study, it looks like, right, can we either save money or offer it to more kids is what I think the board really wants to know.
I think the main reason why the whole budget for transportation went down was because we brought back 3 routes, and it's in Michelle's narrative. Yes.
And so if I remember back to October, and I just want to double check this and make sure that it is, I'm remembering it correctly, so I want to double check it. But we had, if I remember back, we had given some preliminary numbers on some of the ridership for what was happening in October, but then we were going to go back and do a more detailed analysis, like on a snowy day, on a cold day, right? So we'll just want to double check. I think that something tells me it was in October, but I have notes, and we'll go back and find out exactly the meeting it was, and then we'll get that information to you.
So how this came up was, we had asked about it several years ago when I was first on the board, and when we did the last transportation, that's when it came up. We did the last presentation on transportation. That's how it came up again, and we had the survey. And part of why it came up and why we had the referendum on the vote was because we were looking to, we've always gotten complaints about the traffic in the morning at the schools, especially with the middle school and the high school being across the street from one another. I think it would be interesting to see if the ridership has increased, but I think if you really want to decrease the ridership, increase the ridership and decrease the traffic, you really have to offer an early and a late bus. I mean, you really have to do that. And, you know, initially when I brought up about increasing the mileage, and Michael Nightingale brought it up, we were shut down and we told it would cost too much money. And the numbers we were given were astronomical. Then it came back when I asked again, a second time, that it didn't cost anything to do that. So I would really like to get a hard number on what it would cost us to have an early bus in the morning and a late bus, because that's really where the traffic is. I mean, my children, basically from middle school through high school, rarely rode the bus in the morning because they always had early morning orchestra or concert chorale, or there's an increased use of 0 periods at the high school. You have many more parents working to have to wait to drop your child off until 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:20 in the morning. It's really cumbersome to get to work. I mean, I could not drive my children in the morning today because if I had children who need to be driven, because I had to be in Manhattan at 9:30 for a trustees meeting. It wouldn't be feasible for me. So I would like to look at that number and see what that really looks like.
All right, so we can cost that, we can cost those out and bring those back to the board on your next meeting, which is March 1. No problem.
Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. We can cost that out.
It's going to be
I wanted to ask one question about
extensive
that,
because
though.
I believe there's another element of providing the same
private schools.
to private schools.
So if we add, so, right.
Yeah.
So there are absolutely districts, we have neighboring districts who do the late and the early, and I can't find the number now, but it looked to me that that we did have a drop in the number of kids taking the bus between middle school and high school, right, which I think is not just about the mileage, but about the early and the late issues. So I think it makes tremendous sense, but, right, the big cost, a big cost driver is going to be adding all of those routes to all those private schools.
So
I would also add that if you provided early and late transportation to the private schools, you might encourage parents who want to send their children to private school to send them to private school. Could reduce your cost.
How's it
I
going
don't
to reduce
think,
your...
it doesn't reduce your cost.
But
The marginal
why-
cost is not the cost.
But we
You're only paying for
want
the
them-
transportation.
We want them to come here.
Yeah, I know you want them to come here, but I think
not
as
just the transportation.
a practical matter that there are parents who would like to send their kids to private school who sometimes can't do it because of the transportation issues.
Okay.
Just saying, it's worth looking at.
But this is a misstatement. The private school cost is not, to us, is not just the transportation.
Correct. It is not just
textbooks,
transportation.
It's the healthcare, it's the transportation. There are other costs. We've added those numbers up before.
Right.
Still less than
And
your
the-
per pupil cost for
I'm
a child
sorry.
enrolled in the district.
And we all know that the total cost per student is not the marginal cost of an additional student. So
Right.
that is a much more complicated statement than I think people would like for it to be.
Okay. Let's move on. Did we finish this section? Did I miss a section?
I think we are done with the line by line that we set out to achieve tonight.
Okay, good.
So that was actually pretty efficient, folks. That was good work.
Can I ask some general
Sure,
forward-looking
please.
questions then?
Sure.
Yep.
Not just me, it can be anyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for the 5-year look back. That is tremendously helpful. In terms of past expenses, my question is, so that is a huge piece of this. On most of these numbers, we're looking at the actual from 16-17, then we have this year's budget, and then we have next year's budget. So now we can go back and look in a general way at the 5 years. But I'm concerned about the number of budget transfers we've had. So I feel like when I'm looking at the actual budget for 17-18, I know that a lot of money has had to move since then. And I don't know if there's a better way for us to look at that could incorporate some of those moves that we've already had to make this year.
I would love that because I sign budget transfers all the time. So anytime a code goes into the negative, there needs to be a budget transfer, right? It needs to be done that day. So anything that's done that's under, I think, $5,000, I sign. Anything over $5,000 comes to the board. And so they're happening every day. I would love to be able to find a way to have less budget transfers because
most of it has to do with staff and movements because we budget specific for that building, and when there's a movement after the budget is approved, the money has to follow the individual. So all those things cost budget transfer because that's why we try as much as possible to give as much explanation as possible because sometimes it's unavoidable.
I don't disagree, and we've never had we've always we get the detail in the budget transfers. The board has always been comfortable with approving the transfers, but nonetheless, we are left with comparing a projected budget against last year's budget when these numbers aren't as good a baseline as we'd like them to be. And it seems like there should be some way to adjust these numbers or add to the column to indicate how we already know those numbers have moved.
I agree.
So let's let them put their
Think about
collective
that.
thoughts together and think about how to respond to that.
I have two thoughts on the revenue side, but do you want to?
No, please.
I still think on the revenue side, in the miscellaneous categories, when we get to the point where we're really going to talk more in detail about the revenue side, that there's more detail to be had, that we get grants, that we auction off old equipment. There's a lot of detail there that I think is interesting to the board and would be interesting to the public. And we see it, when you read the treasurer's report every month, you can see very carefully, line by line, where that money is coming from. But I think it's interesting in this context too. And the other piece of it is that we still need a comprehensive set of revenue projections as best we can going out a few years. So we've had a couple of graphs that show how we're going to use reserve funds, grant monies, etc. But all of that needs to be put into a full context that looks out a few years so that we can see what the impact is going to be and where we're going to be a few years out. And the other piece of it for me is historically on this year's budget calendar.
Can I ask you a question before on that? Okay. So just so we give you what you're looking for, the revenue projections are probably better they're probably more accurate and reasonable in a 3-year than they are in a 5-year.
I think that's very reasonable, yes.
Right, so if we can do that for you, and we should be able to forecast this out for 3 years.
It can be riddled with asterisks and footnotes.
No problem, we can do that for you.
That's fine, right, it is really, right, there's some crystal ball element.
Okay, we'll get on that.
And so the other piece of it is, we've always discussed the revenue side very late on the budget calendar, and it's late on the budget calendar this year too, and that's for a perfectly good reason, which is all the things you illustrated before us. There are just a lot of moving parts and we don't have all the numbers. And yet, it feels incredibly uncomfortable every year to talk about how much money we're going to spend and then not get to how much money we have on the revenue side until the very end. It feels too late to make any substantial discussions about the use of reserve funds after we've spent months talking about what we need to spend. It may be another situation where I'm not proposing a good solution, but it feels very late in the calendar not to talk more about the revenue side until 2 weeks before we have to have the final number.
Think about
we can think about that because your next budget meeting on March 1 is a lot. Right, so it's the whole, it's the total instructional program, it's technology, it's community services, athletics, special, it's all of, it's the, basically the whole instructional program. So if we wanted to dig in and add another layer to that, we could definitely do the revenue discussion. We could leave it where it is, and we can just dig into it that evening, and then I would make a note for next year to make sure that we do the revenue discussion like on this night, so that way you have more time to move through that process. But we can do it however the board
Because
wants.
the scenario could be right on March 15th when we're looking at revenue projections. If there were some real difference of opinion about when and how various kinds of reserves, et cetera, should be used, you don't have enough time to do anything about it. And that may not be the case. It's usually not the case. It's usually a relatively minor compromise about how much should be used now versus this year or next year.
But do we have a better idea of what the state aid is at that point as well? No.
No. We probably have a, no.
No.
So why don't Olivia and I will spend a little time working on this, the 3-year revenue projection, to the extent that we could have that in a place where we're, feel confident to share that with the board on March 1st. We can do that.
Just start looking at it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No problem.
Start that conversation.
And then it won't be that hard for us to really do that.
Dave.
Okay?
Oh, Dave and then Marion.
Sorry,
Yes.
So I've seen this budget book evolve over time. I think it got to a point through last year where the historical data was strong and we saw the progression on a line-by-line basis. One thing that obviously we all know, I'm not sure everyone out there knows, is that there's a narrative element this year. I really want to commend the administration for that narrative element. It puts things into context. It explains the connection between what we're spending to what we're doing, and not at all in a cursory way. It was really, I thought, thoughtful and in-depth, and it really helped me.
Thank you.
The data, I mean, some of the charts in here are I mean, I have color codes in there going up or going sideways, but just the 20-year progression of the tax classes and how they have changed over these past 2 decades is very helpful to put this in context. So I appreciate that. One small thing, we knew and we know what we're covering on a bi-weekly basis in this budget session, but only a day or two we got the cheat sheet to where in the narratives and where in the budget sections they were. If we could stick that on here, that would be very helpful.
I will get it to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
No problem.
Marion?
So when we're talking about expenditures, one of the areas that I think we've really lacked data on, and this is year 5 for me, being on the board, is what I would call in the corporate world return on investment. So we've done a lot of different things over the years which have been quite expensive. And when I've asked for some sort of data as to are we meeting our goals, I really haven't gotten specific data. So I'm going to give you a couple of instances where I've questioned and asked for the data, and what I've gotten, some of it may be just a point in time in the programs, and I think people have to think about how we gather that data, and maybe at this point it's hard to recreate that data. But when the World Languages program was put in and FLES was put in, we were told that the goal of putting in elementary foreign language was to increase proficiency, and one of the reasons that Mandarin was chosen because it would increase the children's number sense. And when we had an update on that, I didn't get any data. And what I'd really like to see when we do a program is, okay, we're planning this program. This is what we anticipate in year 1 of the program. And did we achieve that goal? And if we didn't achieve that goal, why didn't we achieve that goal? And year 2, this is what we anticipated achieving. We now have these kids in Mandarin, as you can see from the budget, going to the middle school and then to the high school. And we still don't have any data on how effective that program is, or if we could do it more effectively. Another example would be the Readers and Writers Workshop from Columbia. I know that the students are writing more. I spent a lot of time with our former director at the Middle School of Humanities with it. We did get some presentational material, but that was a very, very expensive program. I would say we probably spent close to, by my own estimate, close to $500,000 over a number of years on that program. And it may very well be worth it, but I don't have any measure, some data. What are they doing now that they didn't do before? How did we fill the gap in the grammar on that program? Because we know that the grammar component is not a good component. And I know it's hard to quantify that data because there were a lot of changes going on at the same time with the Common Core rollout. But, you know, we've seen an increase in mastery on the English regions. That may be that class, that first class that got the cohort that got the benefit of Columbia's Teachers Workshop. But I'd like to see some data for that and see if there's something else out there that maybe would give us a better result or a different result. Another example where we spent a lot of money was the SVOs. I would say about $250,000 on that by my calculations, and I think I think with the strategic plan, one of the things that I would really like to see is the integration of those SVOs in our long-term strategic plan, so they're not existing in isolation. And I'd like to see some data on how they've, you know, been integrated. So there are a number of areas, and I know it's kind of hard to wrap your hands around that data, but I would really like to see, when we're spending this money, what our goals are, what we expect to achieve, how we're going to measure that achievement, and then a reflection back as to where we are, and maybe some look at maybe how we could do it better. It's not about spending the money, it's about spending the money wisely and learning from our experience in a more quantitative as well as qualitative manner.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
So, and if you look into, just to go in if you look at page 3 of 4 of Rob Klobicki's narrative, we've, which is section A.
Yep.
2. So if you, what he has done is he's laid out a curriculum renewal cycle. So we'll have a very systematic approach. It doesn't mean that we're not going to look at something for 10 years because it's not on this chart in 10 years, but the major deep areas of focus are all laid out. And so you'll see that there's a year of studying and planning, a year of implementation, and then a year of assessment of what was implemented.
Yes, I do see that, and I did see that before, but my point is I do really want to, if we can even go back and see some of the data.
I agree with you. Yes.
On those other programs.
I agree. To the extent that I can get it, I will. I agree with you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anyone else? Joanna, Rich? Everyone? Okay. Should
No?
we move on? Yes.
So, process is okay.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you on the 1st.
And Betty will guide us on how to put the rest of this in. I got part of it in.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, let's just shuffle around. Okay, let's move on to comments from the public. If you would come up and give us your name and town of residence.
Rob Mazzella, Glenhead. If I was understanding, I think one of Trustee Jones's questions about the budget, I think just recommendation to make this document a little more useful, instead of putting actual budget 17, 18, if that column was changed to an estimated actual budget. In looking at financial documents, you don't compare budget to budget because it really doesn't tell you anything. It should be actual to budget, prior year actual to the next year's budget. It gives you a lot more meaningful information. Realizing we're not done yet, so that's why you can't have 17, 18 actually done, but you could estimate what those line items would look like by the end of the year. The transfers that you were talking about would be in there, and it would give you a more meaningful comparison for those two line items.
Can you repeat what you just said?
Instead of having actual budget 17, 18, if you...
It's 16, 17.
We do have
18.
actual for 16, 17.
Yes, but again, that's...
Yeah, I understand.
It's old.
So
Right.
I believe 17, 18.
17, 18 type of forecast.
Estimated actual.
Yeah, a forecast.
Estimated actual expenditure.
Right.
For 17.
Right, and then you compare that to your budget for 18, 19, and it gives you a better base of comparison between those two columns. In terms of the actual expenditure for 16, 17, that's great too. What would be great to see there is if you had a 16, 17 budget line there, so you could get a comparison for numbers that were there. Now, I am getting old. That would require things to shrink a bit. So the subtotal column that you have could easily slide in. You could combine the two budget columns into one column and make room for that extra column if you so desired.
So Rob, so what you're saying is have the original budgeting amount for 16-17, the actual expense for 16-17,
Right.
the
forecast for 17, 18.
right. So what we actually, so there's the approved.
Right.
So for 17-18, there's the approved budget for 17-18, and then the estimated budget for. So what we'll start to do in March and April the
fund balance.
the fund balance
Right, right,
projections.
right.
I understand. We'll take a look at it.
Just one other comment in terms of the busing. A couple of years ago, after a big snowstorm, I had commented, and I never really heard anything about it. But when it snows quite a bit, if you're driving down Glen Cove Avenue, there are students walking in the street, which is a very dangerous situation. Recently, during that last snowstorm again, I did see children walking in the streets. That does concern me. I don't know if there's any way to address that during snowstorms with some type of additional transportation for the children. The other thing, a little bit, if you're going towards Whittings from the high school, on the high school side of the street, there's a new marine building over there where the guys got a lot of boats. The walk in front of that thing is complete dirt. Now every time it rains, it's complete mud. People where I live in North Shore Acres basically have been asking me if we could do something about that. Basically, again, every time it rains, the children are walking in the street because they can't walk through the mud. So I don't know if there's some type of, I don't know who, it's technically, I think, county property, so the town can't really do anything.
It's a county road?
I think it's a county road, yeah.
Yeah. So, with regard to that specific property, excuse me, there were, it's not a whole, I don't have a whole lot of leverage on the sidewalk, right? But there were instances where the boats and the cars were parked in the sidewalk.
Yep.
And
That's
so
happened too, yes.
Yep. So I called over to Nassau County Police and asked them to look into that for me, and they did. And now when I drive by it, I see that seems
a little bit better. Yes.
Yeah. I haven't noticed. I mean, I look every time now because it's it's like one of the things I do. So, but I'm not seeing the boats and the cars in the sidewalk as they once were.
Yeah.
But I see your point about.
I took a picture a day after it rained one day, and that's a big stretch.
Yeah,
of
it's
road,
probably
and it's completely unpassable. So
Yeah.
the children are walking in the street again, and there's no shoulder there.
Yeah.
So it's just a very dangerous situation.
Yep.
So I'm going to try reaching out to some of the county legislators.
Is this the one that, is this I think Delia, this might be the strip of road that Delia
I don't
and
know if
Josh
it's
were
Delia
talking
or
about.
Josh.
It was
Yeah.
both of them, because both of them were talking with me about it,
Okay.
and and I know that if this is the one, they are working on a section of sidewalk on Glen Cove Avenue.
Okay.
I didn't specifically ask where, but they are working on securing funding, and it was a lot. When I heard the number, it was breathtaking.
Yeah, Alex, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Anyone else?
You want another one?
Speaking to you guys. The only person where I have to adjust the mic down. Is this on?
Yep.
It's
Should
on.
be.
Okay. Is it? Hello? Anyway. I think most of what I have here, as you guys were having the discussion, was subsequently mentioned, but I want to make sure it was mentioned, and I want to make sure it was clear. First of all, Peter, I never thought I'd see a graphic depiction of managing the reserves, and the I mean, Ice Cube was well done, well done. And also, again, thank you for really making the budget process your own, not just taking what was done and redoing it, but making it your own. I appreciate that as a finance person. One of the concerns I think we have in the community is this whole issue around the state aid. You know, we really do cut the cap very close, a few $100,000. And when you look at the $5.2 million in state aid, the $800,000 from the Marcelino-Levine grant, the $300,000 to $400,000 for the tax sanctuary, it really shows that if you lost that or took a hit in any of those regards, it would affect the cap greatly. And it also illustrates the importance, which I think is misunderstood, Olivia's kind of like glide path, to be able to utilize it and then wean yourself off of it. And I think using the tax sanctuary now to kind of soften the blow of losing the Marcelino-Levine money, I think is a good idea. But I think one of the things that's going to be discussed from the community to you, and I'd like you to get ahead of it, and I think you mentioned it, is looking at the budget versus what was actually spent, and any kind of a delta in between there. I don't think we need line items. I don't think we need this type of granularity. But I think at a macro level, at a grouping level or a cluster level, if you could show, you had the conversation just now with Rob, I would turn it on its back. I would say that you know what the budget is from the beginning of this fiscal year till now. You understand that budget number. I think you would also know the actuals from the beginning of the fiscal year to now. So typically when I create or start my budget process, the first thing I look at is budget to date, actuals to date, and the delta. And I think that would be the numbers, because you would want to report it consistently. You would want to take this document, and then when you mature this document into a final budget, you would want to see those same columns. You wouldn't want to see 16, 17 actuals and 17, 18 budget. It just kind of is apples and oranges. So from a cleaner presentation point of view, and certainly from a macro point of view, I think it would help all of us who are supporting the budget if you had that information out there proactively. The other issue is, Marianne mentioned some of the more dynamic reporting in terms of, when we talk about the budget, people look at the budget as an expense. They should look at the budget as an investment. I think I wrote it down, you had fund in ways to forward our mission. So really what we're doing here is making an investment. We're not spending money. And I think that's lost on the community. I think they should look at this as an investment in our students, in our community, in the values of our homes. And I think if you did that, and you looked at things like world language and IB and Columbia Teacher Workshop and on and on and on, IB, like for example, in the case of IB, I think Peter does a job of going out there and saying, I'm sorry, not Peter, Albert does a great job of going out there and talking about the utilization and how many students are in, how many students are maintained. But I think if you looked at the cost and looked at that benefit, it would make a real good case for you guys going forward. So I would try to do, again, not on a detail level because it's a massive undertaking. Olivia is going to kill me. But I think on a macro level, if you take the big programs, the items that are the flashpoints in the community, the items that are discussed and debated in the community, and you say, look, we're spending $500,000, but we have the IB program. And this is the results of the IB program. Right now, we're detaching the expense from the benefit. And people aren't seeing the investment, the return on the investment that she talked about. So I think that's another thing I would suggest, even for this year, if you could do it at a macro level. And then the last one was the budget transfers. Again, at a macro level, I think when you go line item, you know, 5,000 and under from the superintendent, 5,000 and above, you go to the board. There are so many of them, it's constant movement. But if you just directionally took the top 10 categories and showed the flow of that money, I think that would put out a lot of anticipated fires.
Great.
And that's it. Thank you very much. Great job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Tim? Oh. Sorry, Tim, then Dan.
Tim Madden, is this, you can hear me? This
yeah.
on? Okay, Tim Madden, Seacliff. I guess it's more of a comment than a question, and I would, when you discuss revenue, and I guess maybe you're pushing it to a later time, is what it sounds like, just consider the consequences of coming $300,000 below the tax cap. As you know, it's a poorly framed law that penalizes districts that do come below the tax cap because it's going to affect you in every subsequent year. So next year your tax cap is going to be $306,000 lower than it could be. And you know, when you say that the tax cap is a challenge, you're making it a challenge when you come below the cap. And that's unfortunate because of the way the law is framed, and maybe the Legislative Action Committee can work on changing that so that districts aren't penalized in that particular way. But I hope that's part of the discussion, because at some point, 4 or 5 years, maybe 3 years down the line, you're going to wish you had, by that point, you know, an additional $350,000 when you're cutting 3 teaching positions. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Dan? Sorry, then.
Hi, Dan McDermott, Seacliff, and member of the North Shore Coalition Against Substance Abuse. I understand the board is voting tonight on the approval of the agreement between the school and CASA, item G, action G on your agenda. And I just would urge the board, well, first off, I wanted to thank Dr. G. Rizzo, who has been very supportive of CASA, like Dr. Melnick before him, because not only in the support and guidance and time that he gives us, but in the space that he has given us as well for meetings and events, including the one coming up on March 21st. We appreciate that. But the truth is that CASA cannot meet its mission to address our issues in this community, whether it's the opioid epidemic or the underage drug and alcohol use, which is far too high. We cannot do it alone. We need the help of the community. We need the help of the school, and the truth is, it's cliche, but it really does take a village. So I would urge the board to approve that agreement between CASA and the school board. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You'd state your name and town of residence, please.
Hi, good evening. Kat Taramata, Glen Head School, Old Brookville resident. I just have 2 quick questions. One in particularly regarding STEM, that we have a big push in the only elementary levels of school right now. The budget, one of the lines that I found in the master budget that I'm not very familiar with, shows a projected budget of $93,000 for district-wide supplies. How is that being allocated or distributed? Because at Glen Head, that's as far as only I know, we don't even we have a STEAM, I think a half of a STEAM teacher for all 6 grades. So my kids say that they see them from that teacher maybe for 3 to 4 months out of the year, and once in a 6-day cycle, and we send supplies in. But you know, as a STEAM lab, we don't even have a microscope in Glen Head, and at the PTO, we're trying to raise funds to try to even supply some of that, you know, pick up some of that slack. Is there room in the budget anywhere for a more elaborate STEAM lab for the elementary schools, perhaps?
So just. So we're not at, well, there was a there was a second STEAM teacher added to the 2017-18 budget. So there's Adrian Kay,
right,
who runs STEAM across the district. We have been recruiting that. We've been trying to recruit the second STEAM teacher all this year, and we haven't found a good candidate. We've interviewed people, and we just haven't.
So far as just Ms. Kay for 3 elementary schools.
Correct. So next year there will be, we are really working to get that second teacher in place. It's the pool gets better in the spring, so we'll do that recruiting. So there'll be 2 teachers. What I'm trying to find here is, just give me one moment, please.
So at a 5th grade level, we don't really have a science lab at the elementary schools, right?
Ask me again, please. I'm sorry.
Like a science lab, like a proper science
No.
lab,
No.
test tubes, microscope, that sort of thing
No.
at elementary level. Do we have that as the middle school
Yes.
and high school, I'm sure?
Yes.
Can I just add to that? The middle school and the high school labs were just done in this last bond project. We had a change in superintendents, which has really been a part of the delay in doing any further bond work. One of the things that we were looking at as part of a future bond was doing more 21st century classroom and 21st century learning, and bringing the facilities up to date. That they would have rooms that would be better suited to the demands of STEAM. So that's one of the things that as the construction steering committee moving forward, we'll be making recommendations to the board. We will then have our presentations, and we'll have the community input, and we would welcome you, when we're to that point, to come and give your input as to what you as elementary parents would like to see done in the budget at your level, in the bond at your level.
Okay, my last question quickly is, and I'm sorry for my ignorance, but BOCES, can somebody enlighten me as to what it is, why there is in every page?
It's a good question.
I don't know how it affects me. It
Yes.
certainly affects the budget, so
Yeah.
I don't understand what it is.
So BOCES is an acronym. I don't know. I'll get back to it.
The Board of Education, I honestly, I Googled, I mean.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
BOCES,
no, it's
BOCES
very
stands for
complicated.
the Board of Cooperative Educational Services, okay? And pretty much almost every county in the state of New York has a BOCES. There are some counties upstate New York that have shared BOCES, and there are some counties like Long Island, like
Nassau.
Like Nassau has 1, Suffolk has 2. So there's a Western Suffolk and an Eastern Suffolk BOCES. And essentially what BOCES is designed to do is to be a place of shared services for districts. So they also do oversight of districts. So there are special education programs that are housed at BOCES that lots of districts from all over the county send kids to. So not everybody has to run a particular program. The athletic program for the county, so Section 8, runs out of as coordinated by BOCES. There is professional development that you can get from BOCES, and when you buy services through BOCES, it's done through what's called a COSER, which I forget what that stands for.
Olivia.
COSER.
Cooperative bidding.
That's the,
Yeah.
that's the.
It's a cooperative service.
Yes.
Okay, cooperative service. And so when we buy a service through a COS or through BOCES, it becomes eligible for state aid. So there are some benefits to purchasing services through BOCES, and then sometimes there are benefits to not purchasing services through BOCES. So as we go through and evaluate all of our spending, we make those determinations. We also, there's technology you can purchase through BOCES,
Your
and
copier,
you can.
that's a better deal to
Right.
use the copier through BOCES.
Your network and your security
Right.
comes through BOCES. Think of BOCES as twofold, right? It provides programs for students that the district could not afford to run on its own.
That's a great way
Right.
to frame it.
And it also provides a way for districts to, just like any kind of cooperative, to purchase items at a larger volume discount that we would not get because we don't have enough volume to get that kind of discount.
And it
So
provides
it's like the Costco of school districts.
But it provides a framework and a structure for us to be able
Right.
to act cooperatively, to bid on things or to do things that would be redundant for us all to do.
But that is an excellent
And-
question.
So it's not directly to like the student services, it's like a district-wide service.
No,
It's
it-
a
It's a
countywide
countywide service.
Countywide.
But and that we could have students, right, who are directly using some of their services.
Right.
Yeah, there are programs that are best suited for students, and those students are going to be best served by having that opportunity that BOCES provides, that we, in this budget, would not be able to run for 4 kids.
So
per se.
services that they get like bus, especially during the day?
Whether they're
or
academic
just
or
some?
social emotional programs or whatever they are, and there's concomitant
right,
costs
right.
about
Okay.
transportation.
And our summer
Thank you.
school.
And the summer school.
There's summer
Right.
school. They run our summer school, and there's a lot of it for the
Academic
high
summer
school.
school.
There's a half day, some half day programs
And
for
the-
students.
The occupational ed, cosmetology, all those plumbing,
Steam
veterinary,
fitters,
all those, yes.
hair
They provide us-
hairstylists.
Yes, so it's, and you also have to consider the revenue side, like Dr. Giruzo said. We get a lot of money back. In fact, if your aid ratio is very high, sometimes you can get as much as 50% discount by buying through BOCES.
We generally do not.
Yes.
Right.
We generally, we don't. We are just about
We use it
22%.
where it provides us either a better service or a better price.
And by the way, we have no say in BOCES budget. They just give us a number of what our pro rata share is. So those numbers that you see in the budget for BOCES do not come from the district. They come from BOCES.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
True.
You have to stand up and say what your name is if you want to ask a question.
Sorry, good evening. I just want to commend everybody on the board. I'm Marty Glennon from Seacliff. I just want to echo what Dan had said earlier about the North Shore CASA, and pretty much what Marianne said before in the budget and tracking progress. CASA was formed in this room last spring as an outcry from the community and the school, and then the superintendent at that time said, let's get people in the room together and see what we can do. We put together a board, and they've been working tirelessly since that time to try and make a change in terms of what the epidemic is in our community, and it is an epidemic. I was with the district attorney yesterday. The amount of deaths in Nassau County last year from opioids was 20 times more than the homicides in this county. And it's mostly kids under 30 years old.
Absolutely.
So what CASA is at now, we're at a point where the board has worked tirelessly to try and accomplish and collect data and start moving the process forward. But we're at a point now where we need an executive director. One of the things that we've partnered up with the school district in the past is put their educational programs together. Dr. Giurizzo has also been very instrumental. We've met with him on several occasions, been very supportive, and we hope that you'll be supportive as well. And I promise you, when we come back here next year, we will have statistics for you, and we will be tracking what goes on. But I can tell you that every dollar that you spend in programs that we put together for the school district will not go to waste. And if it saves just one life, it's worth it. Right now, we're in the process of doing FOIA requests with the police department in Nassau County to track opioid recordings in terms of what gets reported to the precinct, deaths in the hospitals, and also alcohol. We're going to have a program next month with the district attorney of Nassau County coming down to present to the community social hosting laws, because one of the things that needs to change is the way we look at opioid addictions, the way we look at alcohol abuse, right? I can, in my lifetime, and I know there's some Irish people up here, never thought you would see pubs in Ireland with no cigarette smoking, right? And when it started in here, they said it was never going to happen. But we need to change the discussion. And one way to change the discussion is through the education. And the Nassau CASA, North Shore CASA, is committed to doing that, and we intend to work closely with the community and the school district in putting in together these educational programs and whatever the community needs and what the school needs. So I'd ask that you think about the kids that graduated from this school, that will graduate from the school, that will benefit from this program. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Christine.
Hi, my name is Sophia Caldwell. I'm a Glen Head resident. I got a lot of information out of this. Thank you very much. One of the questions that I had following BOCES was also, I did not recognize the St. Christopher line that you mentioned, and that was a big line, and I know you said that we get revenue back also, but could you just speak on that briefly?
Sure. So St. Christopher's is a school that rests within our boundaries, and students are generally placed there by the courts. And when they go to school there, because the district rests within our boundaries, we have to fund their education, and then we send bills back. So while that looks like a lot of money going out, it's an equal amount of money coming back in to offset the expenditure.
Okay.
And it depends on the number of kids that are placed there. So my understanding, if I remember correctly, it's 3.
3 kids.
Right.
Okay. And it's the residential program?
And the district, through a prior arrangement with St. Christopher's, the district is responsible for placing up to 6 kids.
Wow.
Okay.
Sometimes it goes down to 1, 3, 4. So we have to make accommodation for that.
And I appreciated the commentary by Marianne on the comparisons of the programs in the schools. I mean, what I would even add on the Mandarin, how many children even select in 3rd grade moving forward, and then possibly a comparison of preparedness from the middle school moving to the high school, and ensuring that the programs and the children are working at the pace so that the transition into high school is much smoother for them. I'm not sure I can't speak confidently that currently exists. So I think looking at how the middle school children are prepared for high school, I think is very important for us.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. Okay, so we're going to move on to our action items. So we'll go to action item B, which is the personnel. Could I have a motion? And a second? I have a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Action item C, approval of the 2018 school calendar. If you'll remember, trustees, we spoke about this last week. We had to change, or we were waiting to do the calendar based upon the changes from the state. So could I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Any comments, questions?
Jump in 1 second, please. So the major changes to the calendar for next year that people need to be aware of is that the school calendar will have 2 half-day parent-teacher conferences instead of 1 full day and 1 half-day, and the evening conference will remain from 6 to 9 as is currently constructed. So the reason for that is as I've talked about, is the calculation of the minimum number of days and weeks and all that stuff. So the state has given us some flexibility there.
And why don't you also reiterate the last day of school, because that is different as well.
Yes, this is actually a very important point. So the The last day of school is going to be on Wednesday, the 26th. So for those of you who have been calling my office every day about when does school start, when does school end, the first day of classes will be for teachers September 4. That's the Tuesday after Labor Day. For students, we will welcome students back on Wednesday, the 5th. And school will run through June 26th. Now, for those people who would say that is the dumbest idea ever, Jerrizzo, why would you put the last day of school on a Wednesday? The reason for that is because that is rating day from the state, and that is the last day with which you can have instruction, and there are Regents exams that are happening the day before. So it is what it is. Right. The good part about it is that it extends the school year a little bit, so it gives us flexibility to have the Friday before Memorial Day, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving that folks like here, Easter Monday, right? So it gives you a little bit more flexibility to capture, gives me a little bit more flexibility to build a calendar that is compliant contractually to the regulations and, not helter-skelter. But that's why it's the 26th. It really,
it's beyond our control.
It is beyond me.
Okay. All in favor? All right. Action item.
I'm sorry. You got my abstention there?
No.
Oh.
I didn't think so.
You're abstaining.
Okay.
On the calendar?
Will you call the governor?
On the calendar.
Okay. Action item D, approval of the spring 2018 community education instructors. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Okay, any comments or
I
questions?
have a comment.
Yes.
Okay, so I think the high school's doing a better job of this now, but I just want to put a little plug there for the SAT review courses that are offered through the community ed. When I had children in the high school and I was just perusing the community education book, I found out that there were indeed SAT review classes that no one had made us aware of that are very reasonably priced. The teachers who are doing this SAT review are all excellent. There are our own faculty. So I would encourage people to look at, just a little plug, encourage people to look at the community education book, and if you need these services to please do it. The other thing is, while we're talking about SAT review, there is SAT review and ACT prep and college essay work that's done in the writing center at the high school. I was speaking to a parent last week and they were unaware that that was there. I just want people to know, because SAT and ACT prep is really very, very expensive, and that there are alternatives that they can avail themselves to.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sarah has a comment.
I was just going to say, this is an example, though, where the book mailed before we approved.
Not just the book. Registration was in person the last 3 nights, so everyone signed up.
Yeah.
And we're proving it, so someone could be signing
Not
up.
necessarily, I said.
Yeah, oh. You want to abstain? Call the governor?
I meant the commissioner.
So not ideal.
Not ideal. Okay.
It leaves us a little stuck.
All right. All in favor? Okay. Let's move on to action item E, which is the approval of the budget transfers. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Questions, comments? We've spoken about budget transfers. Anything else? All in favor? Action item F, approval of donation from the North Shore Women's Club to the North Shore High School. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Any questions? A thank you to them. All in favor? Okay. Action item G, approval of the agreement between the North Shore Central School District and the Coalition for a Drug-Free North Shore. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Any comments or questions? Yes.
I have a comment. I just want to clarify for the record, when this agreement was for, when the monies that were going to go from the district to CASA were first presented to the board and the community, it was presented as seed money. that was an unfortunate presentation because the Board of Education cannot use public monies to donate to an organization. Those concerns have been addressed in this agreement. There'll be actually presentational programs that will be done at the district, coordinated between CASA and Dr. Gerizzo. So those concerns have been very specifically addressed and negotiated between the different entities, and I just wanted people to be aware of that there are services that are being rendered. There are procedures in place for documentation as to what those services are. I would ask, though, that I know from many years as a member of the PTO Executive Board, they've done a number of presentations. We've had Nassau County POP here. We've had Nassau County POP also doing social host law. We've had Dr. Dewey twice. We've had Mr. Petrocelli twice. That you might want to include the PTOs in the discussions of what programs, so that we're not repeating programs, that and we're doing something different than what the PTOs are doing and have done.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Just my 2 cents.
We've made,
All right.
CASA has made that request to the PTO.
Okay, great.
All right, so done with questions? Anybody else? All in favor? Oh, Joanna is...
I was recently appointed as a board member of CASA, so I'm going to recuse myself from the vote.
Okay.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, so all in favor? And, no, you can't be.
In spirit.
In spirit.
Are you voting?
I did.
You did.
Okay, so we were unanimous? Yes? No abstentions, no noes?
One abstention.
One abstention and no noes. Got it. Thank you, thank you.
May I make a comment?
You can.
I would be remiss if I didn't express my disappointment at the last-minute change in the contractual agreement that eliminated a board liaison to CASA. I know that we've had discussions about this, and there have been comparisons to other groups, such as the Booster Club or Arts Angels. I think this is a very, very different group that we're talking about. I think that we're living in a very, very different time, and I think that our children are challenged with issues that we never imagined that they would be confronted with. We are the leaders of this community, and I think that we must find a way to understand that CASA and the school district have a very, very have to have a strong partnership, and we are very, very naturally enmeshed in those efforts to keep our children safe. And I would ask my colleagues that in a very near future that we have an appropriate discussion regarding that position, so we can have direct contact with CASA, the programs and the prevention.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you weren't finished.
I don't worry about that communication and that information coming for as long as I'm on the school board, because I will obviously fill you in, but I believe that this board should acknowledge the importance of always having that information and agree on some mechanism to ensure that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Did you have a comment?
I did. The agreement provides for Dr. Gerizzo to be the contact and administrator, so I think it's pretty clear that the school is invested and involved with these programs. This is an independent entity, and it's a 501c3 corporation. We do not appoint board liaisons to any other independent entity, and the idea was to have this to make sure that this was a community-based organization that's not being done at the direction of the board. And to put a board person on there gives the appearance that this is an arm of the district that is being done at the direction of the board. So if we want to have another discussion on this, we can have another discussion on this. But I applaud the efforts of CASA. I thank you for keeping us informed, but I strongly feel it is inappropriate to have a board liaison.
Okay. And so I think it is our responsibility to come up with another mechanism that ensures that communication. I think that we have separate entities, but we need to realize that the success of both of those entities depend on how enmeshed and connected we are. So I disagree, but I do think that decision shouldn't be made by you or me. I think we should have a conversation about it in the future.
I do, and I just want to state that I'm very thankful to all of the volunteers who have worked with CASA, who have helped put it together, given their time, their effort, their energy, and their heart and soul into it. We have way too many tragedies in this community, and all over Nassau County. And I am the parent of teenagers, and we have way too many teenagers who are experimenting and doing drugs and drinking, and some of them with the consent of their parents. And that whole perspective, I look to CASA to help us change that, and I thank them again. So I'm very happy that we're moving forward with this, and that's what the conversation has to be about too. We have to move forward in this district and stop these tragedies, or at least try to affect them somehow. So let's move on to action. Oh, Dave.
Just one thing, without wandering into this debate, this was a large change to this agreement, and I know the question is whether we're discussing it again or whether, I think procedurally, when we're going to have a change of this magnitude, to come to us with less than 24 hours and not have a conversation about that, it should be annotated when it comes through. We read it, we had time to prepare, but this is a big deal, and I don't think that it should be a quickie change. There should be a discussion by the board. We should be fully brought up to speed so we know the context of what's going on.
Okay, fair. All right.
We only got the agreement itself on Friday.
Okay.
So
let's move on to action item H, which is the approval of the health services contract. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor? Action item I, the approval of side letter of agreement between the Board of Education of the North Shore Central School District and the North Shore Schools Federated Employees concerning parent-teacher conferences. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item J, approval of a side letter agreement between the Board of Education and the North Shore Schools Federated Employees concerning donation of sick days. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor? Action item K, approval of another side letter between the board and the Federated Employees Secretarial Unit concerning donation of sick days. Could I have a motion? Motion. And I have a second. Comments? All in favor? And approval of a grant disbursement agreement between this is action item L, between the North Shore Central School District and the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. Could I have a motion? Motion. And I have a second with Dave. Any questions?
Yeah, could we just, it sounds exciting.
Yes.
We're going to spend a little. The state's going to give us $50,000. We're going to renovate the elementary school cafeteria kitchens in some way. Can we hear more about it?
Absolutely. So there was a $50,000 grant that the district received back. The grant was applied for in 2016. It had to go through the State Assembly and the Senate, and the disbursement agreement just came through this week. And this is after you had gotten your initial agenda, so I apologize for the late addition on this one. But this grant is to fund kitchen equipment for the elementary schools. There's going to be a gas convection oven at Glen Head. walk-in cold storage at Seacliff, char broilers and ice machines at Glen Head, Glenwood Landing, and Seacliff, and all the fees for the installation, contractors, and inspections are included in the grant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great.
It's a win all around.
great.
All right. All
And we
in
wanted to
favor?
get it approved. Great.
We're good.
So that we could get back up to Albany and say, okay, now the board's approved it, now give
Now
us
we
the
can
money.
do it. Okay.
Right.
So, did you get it? Did you get everybody? Okay.
Thank you.
Action item M, approval of change order. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Comments or questions?
I did. Is that, are we, for that, it was talking about paint removal from the windows, I think it was Glenwood Landing, behind the columns. Is that one from the summer, or was that something, that's from the summer that we're now doing the
Yes.
change order? Love
Yes.
that. Those are my favorites. Thank you.
All in favor? Okay. Comments from the public?
I know none of them blasting or paint off.
Denise Reiner, Glen Head. I'm very grateful for the formation of CASA. I know that we did have Coalition for a Drug-Free North Shore for years, and somehow that gave way, and CASA is sort of an expanded resurrection of that, but much more community-based. And I know that I remember when the idea of CASA was presented to the community, and actually we were in Glen Head at that time. There was that huge meeting in Glen Head, and we had just lost another young soul. And the community came and they wanted to know what we were going to do differently within the district. And at that time, one of Dr. Melnick's, what he believed was, yes, we can do more in the district, but this is a community-wide problem, and we need the community to look at itself as well and come up with other ideas and to follow the model, I think, that was in Manhasset. I don't know exactly what month did CASA first start forming with the board? Do you know?
February.
It was in February?
January,
February. And, you know, I know that it was intended to be helpful, because to get a community organization started, sometimes it needs a little help, and some people were put into place, and you know it's gone through its growing phases, and it still is. The PTOs, the request that went to the PTOs did not come through originally through coordinating council a year ago, but it did a few months ago, and we are going to give CASA the list the PTOs are collecting and checking from years past. But I just want everybody here, some of you have been involved with the PTOs, some of you haven't, some of you already have had children that have gone through the schools, some of you haven't, some of us don't have children in the district. The PTOs actually, all of these programs that you're talking about, we actually, the parents' organizations do offer and have paid for. So when we're talking about programs that CASA will bring in, and we're talking about a contract to give money, I just know that not in any way to take away from the importance of that we do need CASA, but maybe it can change the way we look at and ask ourselves, how exactly is it best that CASA puts forth its efforts? So the things that I've heard, we kind of already can do a lot of those things, but things like the fact that kids hang out at home and have nothing to do, boredom is a big issue. In this community, there's no place for kids who don't drive. There's nothing for them to do. We used to have the bowling alley that close, so, you know, things like that, you know, CASA could definitely, I think, make within the community, reach out to the community and try to get businesses to perhaps have open mic nights in restaurants, or things for the kids to actually do. But when CASA was formed, what we didn't get back to the conversation, which the community tried to have that conversation, is what are we doing within the schools right now and what can we do better? An expansion of our health program under Don Lang, that has been brought up, and he would, I believe, this is, I shouldn't quote him, I'm under the impression that he would embrace the chance to expand the health curriculum and for education and substance abuse and healthy living and wellness. So that's something within the schools of something that we can do. Right now, when children come to school and they might be high from a substance, I am under the belief that we don't have a policy in place of exactly the best way to deal with these students, and I think that some faculty may feel uncomfortable addressing those issues. Sometimes the children get sent to the assistant principals, but there's no graded policy like first time and what we should do and how we plug them into a system. So I just think that CASA, yes, there are wonderful things that they can do. Some of the things that we're talking about are already being implemented, and I just don't want us to, with monies, I think we also, ourselves, the board, we all are responsible for in the community in this school, is to look at what we're failing at within the school. So I just don't want to take our problem and say CASA is going to fix it. If we're really going to partner, we have to put some money and resources right here.
Okay.
May I?
Yes, please do.
So you're absolutely right. So we are what we need to do firstly is look at our curriculum, K through 12, look at where the where our health and wellness strands are, what we are doing deliberately to teach teach children how to be armed with skills and strategies to not engage in substance abuse and use and tobacco use and abuse and alcohol use and abuse. So that excuse me, that is work that is happening, that's starting in the district to assess what exists and what doesn't exist, and then we'll be building that work as we move forward as hopefully a strong component of our next strategic plan.
And how are we utilizing? We have a new social worker from LICAD that we hired that worked with LICAD.
Sure. Well, she's right, but that's not her only responsibility. So we have two social workers at the high school, and one of them was we hired her from the from LICAD, but she sees lots of kids throughout the day for all sorts of reasons, not just substance use and abuse issues. So there's the first piece of examining what exists within our instructional program and what can we do better, and then there's the component that I will rely upon CASA as a CBO, a community-based organization, to really help do that very wide outreach through their sector groups. And I'm meeting with them every month.
And what about policies for when children come to school high and how to deal with?
That's absolutely stuff that I will look at. Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Then one other thing, Denise. We're about to get the results of the survey that every kid 7 through 12, and that will give us a real game plan on the kinds of things that we need to prioritize.
Absolutely.
In terms of where use is happening, what kids are using, etc.
Rob?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Rob Manzello, Glenhead. Just curious, with the money that's being set aside for CASA, is that funding, is that exclusively being used to fund programs, or is that being used to fund the operations of the organization?
Programming.
Programs.
And just one last question about the budget, if I may. There was one, I can't remember which one it was. There was one rather large number associated with the pilots in terms of the revenue source. It was
The
over
6 million?
Yeah. Now the pilots, I guess, do expire eventually. And just in terms of how do you work that into your melting ice cube analogy, in essence, I don't know when they end, but how does that...
to look at that. I'll look at the termination date on those.
Okay.
Thank you.
2027, 2028.
On the peakers, that's the peakers.
That's on the peaking.
That's on the peakers.
But then you have all those other properties that were taken off the tax roll last year, the LIPA properties, and that 2015, that was like $6 million, right?
Well, I think the
And the
question
budget, that's been there.
Regardless of when the year is,
Right.
what does happen? Then it's up for
Right.
grabs again, then it's gone, then it's back on the tax rolls, what?
Right, how does it, if that 6
How
million
does
goes
it-
away, what
right.
happens the next year?
Right.
That would,
We have a hole.
you know, that would be the ice cube kind of getting,
Right.
you know, pulled away from you all at once.
Right.
In what you were saying.
Absolutely.
Just one last question about the CASA, just recommendation. I don't know who's actually in charge of it, but Dr. Melnick had reached out to the civic associations well over a year ago, asking for people to, if they wanted to, were interested in volunteering. Several people did volunteer, but nothing ever really came of that. So the civics are there; they're a good resource. They're more unified than ever now because of the whole water issue. But they're there; they're active. There are a few people who are doing a lot of work and dedicate a lot of time. I'm sure some of them would still be interested in volunteering. So please don't forget to reach out to those people to kind of help with those things.
I certainly won't, and we're reaching out. We're doing exactly that, reaching out to a number of different community organizations who we need to be on board with us. Allison Camardella will be in touch with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to old business. Let's move on to new business. Let's move on to adjournment. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Wait. I think Sarah had something. Did you?
I have old business. Just
All right, I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm like, what's your old business? Quick.
I wanted to say that we had a fantastic discussion last time about adding the AP courses and
Yes.
the IB thing. It was a pretty significant proposal and change, and we did not talk about how we would measure the success of that. How would we evaluate that change?
Okay, so let's let Dr. Gerizzo think about it and respond.
I would like to see on that because I know that when my son took HODA, that Jen Imperial came into the classroom and said that the curriculums did not match, and they originally weren't even allowed to sit for the AP exam. So I did see in that proposal additional support for that particular AP exam and for AP Comp, where the books are completely different than the books that are for HODA 1. So I'd be interested to know exactly how they're going to get that additional support that's put in that presentation, because they most certainly will need it if they're going to be successful on those AP exams, because the curriculums do differ.
My question was more open-ended. I'm not even assuming you're measuring it just on how they score on the AP exams or some particular level of support. I'm saying,
We'll get you.
what is success and how will we
Right.
measure it?
How do you measure the success?
We'll
Okay.
capture all the,
It's one of our goals for the year, so that should be part of it.
Sure.
definitely.
Okay. Motion to adjourn? I had a motion. Do I have a second? All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
We're going to organize a boycott at the second.